Thank you very much, and what a wonderful opportunity to be invited to speak to you tonight, and to get out of the bubble that is Parliament House, because it can become so consuming, and you think that everybody is thinking about political strategy and everybody's worried about what journalists are thinking when they're in their media packs. You realise actually there's a whole lot more going on outside in the real world as soon as you step off that big hill in Canberra. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and reflect, I guess, on their inspiration to the types of things that I'll be talking about tonight. Compassion, the idea of linking the health of our communities to the health of the environment. And I believe sincerely that if we learnt a bit more from our traditional owners, that perhaps we'd have things a little more right in terms of the balance of our finite resources. I'd like to thank the Art Gallery of New South Wales for inviting me, and really to reflect on the artwork of the exhibition tonight. The idea that you can capture a place and a time in a photograph, to me is quite special. It becomes the reason why photography is definitely my favourite form of art, because I think the camera lens never lies. In politics, that's not always a good thing. In politics, you always think, oh, hang on a minute, was I looking this way, was I looking that way? Did I look upset when actually I was just yawning? But the camera at that point in time never lies, and that's what I love about it so much. It really reflects a single point. And of course, the exhibition tonight is really about place and time, and why Australians and our communities as individuals, why we feel a certain connection to place. Whether that be cultural, whether that be our family, whether that be our society, our government, our politicians making decisions. It's about why we find place such an important part of our identity. And in reflecting on that, I'd really like us to think about the finite resources of our country, the need for us to be more sustainable in the way we manage our land. Protecting this wonderful country of ours and ensuring that we continue to have spectacular landscapes for photographers and for artists to have inspiration from and to draw inspiration from is a really, really important thing that I'm passionate about. Common themes such as compassion and fairness are core values to which many of us as Australians hold dear, and they are integral to the story that is told through art and the representation of our communities and particular our landscapes. A picture tells 1,000 words, and it is definitely a cliche, I get that, but it is so true. And art for such a long time has always told the story of our nation. Growing up in regional Victoria, and now representing the people of South Australia, I'm acutely aware of the challenges that we face in preserving our vast and unique environment for future generations. Engaging young people in making the decisions and shaping the future of our country and its fortunes is essential, and I welcome the opportunity to be able to share as a young person in Parliament my vision for how we do that. In my view, how we care for the environment reflects on our broader values. I had a short time at home after a long week in Parliament last week. I spent the weekend at home and I planted the front area of our garden with my daughter. We dug it all up, we put in the strawberry plants, we put in some bulbs for the spring, and it was a wonderful process for a parent to teach those gardening techniques to my daughter. But actually it's far more than just that. It's actually about engaging her in understanding how to connect to the environment, how to be responsible for something, how to nurture that. Of course, most families have a family pet and they encourage their kids to feed the dog. It's the cat. Has the cat been fed tonight? Can you go and do that? It's about teaching responsibility and engaging your children in that responsibility of caring for something other than themselves. And that, to me, really indicates why caring for the environment is actually about caring for people. We do it as children, taught from our families, and we carry that through. It is those values about caring for people. A healthy environment means a healthy community. A healthy community, of course, means healthy people. And let me just say about our environment that it has changed dramatically in the last 40 years, and the photographs of the exhibition tonight reflect that. Just as the environment has changed, I think community attitudes have changed. No longer do economists accept the false dichotomy between the economy and the environment. In the 21st century thinking of Australia, we know we cannot have economic growth and job creation that is not environmentally sustainable. Some people with their head buried in the sand might suggest that, but if you're true and honest about the job creations of the future, then you know that they have to be environmentally sustainable. The common misconception when discussing the need to transition to a zero carbon economy is that there will be a slash and burn approach to jobs. Far, far from it. The reality is that those industries that are environmentally sustainable are the ones that will be guaranteed to be long-term and to be investing in the workforce of the future. Climate change deniers, we know there's some out there. With some awful photographs taken last week. Now that's a photo that doesn't lie, of protesters out the front of Parliament House. Now, climate change deniers would argue that the Greens and environment groups are economically illiterate, and yet it is they that have their head buried in the sand. They will see, without movement, without change, without acceptance that we need a sustainable economy based on managing the finite resources of our country and our globe, it will be they that see the jobs of the future diminish. We actually need a new way. We need a long-term approach. The Greens are advocating for a long-term approach, and we advocate for that because it is economically responsible. As a South Australian, I'm only too aware of the vulnerability of some industries to climate change. When I first started my term as a senator, I travelled throughout the Murray-Darling Basin and I saw firsthand the dramatic effects on communities of the drought. Not only was the drought destroying jobs and robbing farmers of their livelihoods, it was also strangling entire communities, infrastructure, and of course the environment. And as a child who grew up in Victoria, my first idea and image of the beautiful Murray-Darling Basin was in fact, and the end result of that was in fact the movie Storm Boy, and the beautiful images in that movie of the Coorong and the Lower Lakes, now in my home state of South Australia. And it was that natural beauty represented in that film that was on the brink of destruction over the last decade of drought. And I said earlier that a picture tells 1,000 words, and that Storm Boy film really does show that. The photos that were shown throughout that period of farmers weeping at the loss of their livelihoods, communities brought to their knees, famished wildlife, dry rivers, brittle native plants and trees, all of these things are snapshots of what we don't want to have to return to. But if we don't start to take seriously the impact on climate change, we will see history repeat itself. It's a terrible irony that the destroying floods in North and Southern Queensland over the last 6 months has brought with it a revitalisation of communities further downstream. But we must remember that we actually have to grasp this opportunity and change the way we manage that precious resource of the Murray-Darling Basin and that water if we are to ensure that we learn from those mistakes. Mother Nature has given us an opportunity to change, and we must take that challenge up. Just as I believe that we need to care for our natural environment, we must also care for the people, and this means extending a hand of compassion to the most vulnerable in our community. And it's this vision of compassion and learning about differences and respecting each other that really was the driving force behind my decision as a young woman to stand for Parliament and to represent what I saw as core Australian values: compassion, a fair go, and looking out for each other. The tipping point for me that said, okay, it's time, you can't just sit on the sidelines and talk about this stuff, you've got to get active and you've got to get in there, was when I started to see those core values diminished and eroded because of the way we were treating asylum seeker children. It was the way we were treating vulnerable people who were desperate for protection from war-torn nations. As we stood as a country advocating for a fair go, I saw children who were locked behind bars, sewing their lips together, crying out for help. Children who had no other means of communication to the outside world but to mutilate their own bodies as a desperate cry for help. And I thought to myself, why on earth is this happening in Australia? How on earth could somebody be allowing this to happen? So I decided to get active and to get involved. And while I would like to say, fast forward 11, 12 years on, while I would like to say that the Tampa has long been forgotten, the way we treat those children with something of the past, indeed it actually isn't. And I fear that we are about to enter, and that we've entered, a new era of dirty politics. And I think all you need to do is look at some of the scenes and hear some of the stories of asylum seekers who are currently being detained in detention facilities on Christmas Island and around this country, some of the stories of the past month, and you can see that unfortunately some people haven't learnt from the past. We have seen broken promise after broken promise from the government on this as for a new compassionate and humane approach, and we've seen fear-mongering after fear-mongering from the coalition. All too often, when we talk about the debate surrounding Australia's border security policy, we tend to find ourselves in this ridiculous, unnecessary scaremongering campaign by both major parties about boat people, conveniently turning a blind eye to the terrifying circumstances that these people have fled, seeking our protection. While political parties can invariably play politics and find ways to spin their line to their advantage, I find increasingly distressing and unfortunate that the issue of asylum seekers is not immune to this common practice, and it should be. We shouldn't be playing politics with people's lives. We really shouldn't. Okay, let's debate income tax, let's debate how we move forward with our economy, but let's not lock vulnerable children up for the sake of showing political might. It's the lowest that you can go, and unfortunately, we still have not learnt from that. As a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Convention on Refugees, we are a country that still considers ourselves to be compassionate. I believe we are compassionate. I believe that we're a wonderful country, but I believe that these policies are undermining that. The way in which our political leaders constantly use desperate people in search of protection as political footballs is in the long run not only going to diminish our values and our standing, but unfortunately it does play into the wider international perception on the needs of these people. How can we expect countries like Indonesia to sign the refugee protocols if Australia is showing that this is the way you do it? It just won't happen. We need to be showing as much leadership as others. We need a policy that upholds our international obligations, but of course human rights. And the government has, of course, been warned about these things time and time again. What can we do to avoid it? We need some time limits on detention. We need to make sure that children are not detained. Yes, of course, we have a process by assessing people's claims. Every country needs to do that. But let's not treat these people like criminals as we go forward. It is unnecessary. No other country in the world does it the way we do, and yet we take the smallest number of people. It's unfortunate and distressing that this continues to play out in the political domain. If there was a time limit on detention, and if asylum seekers were being housed in the community, I bet your bottom dollar that the events that we saw over the last month would not have occurred. History tells us if we treat people like criminals, if we lock them up for months on end, vulnerable people who are already suffering torture and trauma, that is going to be the result, and that's what we saw. We need to do better than that. We need a fair and just immigration system that upholds Australia's commitments to international law and human rights. And we should understand that refugees are just people too, and they deserve to be treated fairly. I think it's fair to say that as a nation that prides itself on committing to the fair go, our political leaders still have a long way to ensuring that the laws reflect that. As I said, I do believe that we're a compassionate country, and I do honestly believe we're the country of a fair go, but our laws need to uphold that as well. It can't just be left to those in the community who are advocating and doing this on a voluntary basis. The concept of fairness is ingrained in our psyche, and from a healthy cynicism that comes from our convict past to the sense of mateship and decency that grew from our formation of our union movement, I don't think I have to tell anyone in this room that a fair go is a saying and a feeling and a value that is innate to Australia. But to me, a fair go means providing opportunities for all people to achieve happiness, prosperity, good health and well-being, regardless of their gender, their race, their ethnicity or their sexual orientation. Providing opportunities for people to be the best that they can be, and that means greater investment in our education system, removing those barriers to participation, meaning that education can't be deterred from people simply because of the expense. It needs to be affordable. We can't just have kids from one suburb being able to go to the best school because they can afford it. We need kids to be able to all go to the best schools because our public education system sets the standard. We need to make sure that those students wanting to study to be doctors and nurses and to give back to their local communities can do that even if they come from the bush. We shouldn't be putting more barriers in place just because they come from rural and regional Australia. Providing opportunities for people to exceed means a fair industrial relations system that protects workers' rights, that allows parents to take that time off from work to look after their newborn babies and to ensure that that doesn't become an impediment to their success in their jobs. We need to make sure that the Australian community is reflected, the diversity of the Australian community is reflected in the boardrooms as well as in the cabinet. We need to make sure that policies that work to benefit all Australians are what is being discussed by our parliamentarians, and not just those that walk the corridors of power. It's absurd that in the 21st century, in Australia, women are not appropriately represented at the board or managerial level of our major corporations. Women have a lot to give in this area, and I defy anyone who suggests that those talented, well-skilled and capable women aren't out there. They are. It's about actually broadening our view of what corporate Australia wants and can use. It's time for the business sector to step up and for government to really lead the change for this. Providing opportunities for all people to achieve happiness means encouraging people to be themselves and to have the same legal rights and protections regardless of who they are. And this means allowing, and this is something that is very dear to my heart, this means allowing all couples who want to celebrate their love and commitment through marriage the opportunity to do so, irrespective of their gender or sexual orientation. The sky will not fall in if we allowed same-sex marriage. In fact, in some countries in the world, I believe that the sun is shining even brighter. The idea that same-sex marriage would undermine the institution of marriage, I firmly dismiss. The idea that same-sex marriage will diminish the image and value of marriage, I dismiss. I think the more people who are able to participate in that union and celebrate their love and commitment to each other, the stronger that the institution of marriage will grow. The sky will definitely not be falling in. Providing opportunities for people to achieve happiness also means safeguarding against discrimination through nationally consistent anti-discrimination laws. Rights should not stop at state borders. All Australians should have the same rights and protection from discrimination, whether they are here in New South Wales or in my home state of South Australia. Providing proper and accessible healthcare means ensuring that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children get the same health outcomes as their non-Indigenous peers. And we have a long way to go on that, but it must be a national priority. A nationally funded Denticare scheme to ensure that Australians have healthy teeth. God forbid that we would want a scheme that allows affordable dental care. You can go to the doctor because you have a sore toe and it gets paid for by Medicare, but you can't go and get your teeth fixed or deal with a toothache and put that on Medicare. We need a reform to the system and a Denticare scheme funded to allow Australians to be able to be looked after the rest of the health of their body, because we know that healthy teeth is so significant to health and well-being. And the Greens believe that we could be paying for this out of a reconfigured mining tax. Why not? $100 billion the mining corporations are about to claw back because of the weakened mining tax that was put forward by the government. Imagine where that could be going if we were getting back our fair share from Australians' resources going back into our health system, and a national dental care scheme could go a long, long way. Prime Minister Gillard has recently suggested that our nation is effectively at a crossroads between the extreme left of the Greens, God forbid we want healthy air and clean water and a national dental care scheme, so extreme, and on the other hand, the Conservative Abbott opposition. Now, we are at a crossroads, but it's not about whether we go left or we go right. It is about whether we take the challenge to tackle the things we need to tackle to make our community sustainable for the future and to provide in the national interest the future that our next generation wish to inhabit. Or, at the other side of the crossroads, we could sit back and do nothing. The plan of action and positive change led by the Greens and others in the federal parliament who want to see these outcomes, and those in the community who are desperate to get past the political spin and beating up simply because that's the sport. That is the decision that needs to be taken. We need a path for action. As a young woman who has a daughter, and I'm only too aware of the challenges that we face in ensuring that our children and our children's children have a cleaner, greener and more secure planet. Thinking long term and delivering change in the present is the challenge that we must take up. Sitting back, hoping someone else will do the heavy lifting, simply doesn't cut it. And we can't think that that is our get out clause. We, as the custodians of the planet, of the future of the planet and the future of our communities, are required to ensure that we pass on to the next generation and generations beyond that a world that we would be proud to have nurtured. Just like my daughter was so proud when her first strawberry turned red and she was able to pick it. She had such glee, she had such excitement, and she was so proud of the strawberry that she had planted. Just like her, we need to be proud of the future that we pass on to our kids and to their kids and to their kids. Thank you very much. Thank you to the New South Wales Art Gallery for inviting me. I think that when we take a snapshot of time and place, we also need to be thinking about where we're going in the future. Thank you very much.